And welcome into PressBox Live. I'm Stan the Fan Charles from PressBox and PressBoxOnline.com. With me is the old left-hander, Ross Grimsley. How are you, Ross?
Wonderful, buddy. How you doing?
I'm doing great. And how's the weather down there in Bradenton?
It's all. I hate to say it. It's 60. It's a little cool.
All right. We're sorry about that. We're sorry about that. All right.
Sorry to tell you.
Joining us tonight is one of my favorites, number 27 in the back of his uniform, number 1 in your hearts, right-handed pitcher, Dave Johnson. And Dave, you had obviously one of the worst days that any family has. You were moving today. Why didn't you tell me that when I booked you for today? Say, well, Stan, I can't do it. I'd love to make the $500 you pay, but
this is the first day he's back to do it.
Yeah, it's not so much that I'm moving today. We moved in over the last week, which means we'll be moving for the next month and a half or 2 months.
Okay,
so
gotcha.
If it wasn't today, then I'd have to say, hey Stan, catch up with me in September. So
okay.
It is what it is.
So you explained to Ross and I before we went on the air, you've got now a Johnson family compound out there in Falston. Tell us a little bit about that.
About 5-6 years ago, I knew both of my boys, Steven and Daniel, were, they were looking for some land and they were going to be getting married at some point. Steve actually hadn't even met his wife Bailey yet. So it was one of those deals to where we were trying to find some land in Hartford County, which is really hard to find. We ended up a friend of mine, Craig Falanga, who has Pinnacle Home Construction. He built my last house. And then now he's in the business full time, and he wasn't at that time. And he's like, hey, I know a couple builders. I found 2 lots. They're right next to each other. Are you interested? So he negotiated the price. We bought them. And then this has been like a 6 or 7 year project here. My youngest son, Daniel, who works for Channel 2, he got married and actually just had a little baby, our first granddaughter, a few months back.
Congratulations.
I'm a granddaddy. And so little Charlotte is right next door. And so they've been there for about 4 years. And so him and his wife, Sarah, everything's kind of settled there. Then Steve met his wife, Bailey. And I'm assuming to some extent that was like, you get down on one knee and say, will you marry me and my parents? Because the plan all along was that we were going to get the 2 lots and then they were going to build the houses. And then one of those guys were going to get stuck with us with a little in-laws quarters on the side. Unlucky for Steve, it was him. And fortunately, Bailey decided to say yes. And so she married him, Steve, and us, since we're going to be living with them. And interestingly enough, Bailey's dad, Bob Odell, played for Lefty Driesell back in 69, 70, 71. So,
I remember Bob. That's Bailey's dad?
That's Bailey's dad.
Okay.
Yeah, so anyway, we finally, the house got completed about a week or 10 days ago. We moved in. And last week, actually, I was down visiting Ross. I was in Bradenton.
Yes, he was.
Playing golf at a Pirates alumni golf thing that we do every year in Bradenton. So I texted Ross and said, hey, why don't we get together? So we had a drink or two. And he, of course, told a story or two. And so I got to see Ross last week. And but since I've been back, I got back Monday night, last Monday night a week. And, again, unpacking and moving in and all that stuff. So
Stan, he missed all the heavy lifting. He missed all the heavy lifting and the movers.
I get it.
You need to keep that on the down low.
How's Tara doing? How's she liking it?
Yeah, she's she loves it. Now she's actually next door, babysitting Charlotte, the new granddaughter. So she's in heaven because this was her plan. She wanted to live, have a little in-laws quarter, so we weren't, in their houses, but right here on the compound, so to speak, so she could watch the grandbabies. And so the plan's kind of coming together.
Good. When is Bob Odell moving in?
Well, interestingly enough,
and Lefty.
Yeah, and maybe Lefty will be coming along too. But I think Bob and Susan, Bailey's parents, they actually will, I think, be staying from time to time at the house. They're going to maybe do the basement down there, put a little like a bedroom and a little kitchenette maybe there, because they actually have a house in the Bahamas.
Oh, good for them.
So they're going to be in the Bahamas, I think, most of the time, and then every now and then they'll spend a couple weeks here.
All right. Ross, you go ahead with any baseball questions you have.
Oh, really? DJ, we were talking a little bit earlier, spring training, if it starts, and I'll get into that a little bit later, but it does start. Are you going to be doing anything with the Orioles?
Well, interestingly enough, I am actually going to be kind of, if nothing else, as like an extra guy. I'm going to be kind of there as a fill-in guy. We've talked and we've kind of made a little plan together to where, Ben, I think Ben and Palmer are splitting the games. Of course, Ben has a pretty heavy schedule also with his college baseball stuff that he does, and of course Palmer's on the West Coast. So if there ends up being a conflict of the schedule or something like that, I'm here in Baltimore. So the Orioles kind of reached out to me and we went back and forth for a little bit. And so I'm kind of going to be that somewhat of an emergency guy. They may schedule me here or there possibly, but in the end, I'm just going to be kind of here. And if they need me, I'm going to be.
You're the floater.
I'm just a fill-in guy, and we'll hopefully things will go smoothly. If I do some games, fine. If not, that'll just be fine as well.
Now, are they going to do any spring training games, and we'll get a chance to see if if they do, you'll come down here?
Yeah, they haven't put a schedule out as far as anything like that. They haven't put a schedule out to my knowledge of anybody as far as the radio and TV. So I don't know anything. You can ask me, a whole bunch of questions, and I'll just say, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, right.
So let me jump in and ask you. Do you have a gut feeling? And I'll ask Ross the same question. You guys played. You both were members of the union while you played. Do you have any sense when you think we might see a real regular season game in the 2022 season? I'll start with you, Dave.
I have to say that I really don't have a clue about that, Stan. I think these things change. I think many times you think, okay, they're going to get this thing done. Because let's face it, I think most people look at it and go, how can they not get this done? There's too much money on the line. Get this thing done.
Right.
But it doesn't always go to plan. So as much as I think that they're not going to let this thing drag on too much longer, I thought that was the case last time, when there was a work stoppage. And I thought that was the case when, I finally got to the big leagues in 89 and 1990 comes around. I'm excited for spring training. We get locked out. So, we started the season late. And so I really don't know. And I haven't followed the negotiations like every minute because I have been busy with the whole move-in and everything. And I haven't probably followed as much as I probably could have or should have. But what I found out with most of these things is that you read one thing and then you read somebody else. It's totally the opposite. So which one's the truth? I'm not sure. Sometimes it's better off just waiting until it's done. And then you go, okay, now let's go.
Pretty much, yeah.
Ross, do you have, I know we're interviewing Dave tonight, but on this question, when do you think we'll see a first game in Major League Baseball?
I really hope, and we talked about this before, that I'm kind of positive about it because I just don't, baseball cannot stand to go through this type of thing. I mean, they're losing fans anyway, and this really puts a bitter taste in their mouth. And actually, there's no Ripken going for the consecutive games. There's no home run guys. There's nothing to really bring the fans back to see other than baseball. So you really hope that that goes. And just like Dave said, you read one thing, you hear one thing. How true it is. I know some of the things are really askew, basically. But one thing I have seen and read, and it sounds like there is usually it used to be that everybody was against the players. The players are wrong. They're greedy. It's more, I hear more talk about the ownership and the owner and the commissioner. And that is really being something that the people are really voicing their opinion about. And obviously you got social media, you hear a lot, but it sways more toward the players now as being the favorites in this thing. But I hope that they get it worked out because I don't think baseball can stand a whole lot more of what's going on.
Dave Johnson is our guest tonight. Dave, if there is a work stoppage and, officially, I guess the work stoppage, meaning that the lockout is in the way of what was supposed to be the regular baseball calendar. It technically, I'm sure it starts in the next 2 or 3 days. Pitchers and catchers would have been down reporting. At what point does this really throw off pitchers, because pitchers are really, it doesn't take too long to get into hitting and fielding shape. I'm thinking like 3 weeks, but pitchers, it's a big different story there when you want them to build up to at least be able to pitch 4 to 5 innings.
Well, that's all they pitch now anyway. So
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
So it doesn't take them that long to get it ready to pitch opening day because they're only going to go 5 or 6 anyway.
Right.
And they'll have 110 pitches, of course, though.
Right.
So it's just want to be. It's a different situation too, Stan. When you look at this, you know, I know we always think about that spring training is too long, and it usually is for the hitters and the position players. But yes, you have to have that gradual, playing time and the days off, because you can't, as the pitchers, you can only throw so much, and then you need the rest in between. But it is different than when Ross played back, when he played with Fred Flintstone, and then when I played, because we didn't have the facilities that they have now. I mean, not that playing indoors is the same as outdoors, because it's totally different, but you can get relatively close with all the facilities that they have now. Also with the major league players, they make so much money now, and good for them. But they can actually afford to go to spring training a week or 2 or 3 or whatever early, and buy a place out on the beach, do their workout 2 or 3 hours a day, whatever, and then go to the beach out on Santa Maria Island or Longboat Key or whatever, where even when I was playing, if I was in big league camp, my first year or 2 in the big leagues, I didn't go to spring training early. I couldn't afford to go to spring training early. And when Ross was playing, a similar situation, I'm sure he probably didn't go real early because it wasn't cost effective to be able to go down there early. So I think they'll be able to do it in a relatively shorter period of time than when we did it. But there is still that factor that you have to be careful, because you do need not only to throw, but you have to have that rest in between before you go and throw again.
Ross, you got a couple?
Dave, speaking of pitchers, obviously years and years ago, we threw, you throw an inning or 2 your first outing in spring training, then the next time you throw 3 innings. Right. And there was a pitch count, obviously.
Was Barney Rubble down there with you?
Yeah, exactly. Him and Wilma and the whole gang. But it took, you built up your arm. You were ready to leave spring training. You could pitch 7 innings if you had, the right amount of pitches and it wasn't too much of a strain. But the thing now is the guys, we went through the dead arm period in spring training. They don't do that now. They go through it at the beginning of the season. A lot of guys, you see that, or eventually at some point in the year, they're going to go through a dead arm, and everybody kind of goes through a little bit, but it's more so now during the season and before it was in spring training. And you kind of spent the first couple of weeks of the season, still continuing to build up arm strength. But now they're doing it probably the first month of the season because they're not throwing. They don't throw as much anymore. They don't do a lot of things as much, and it has hurt them, I believe.
You got a question for Dave?
Oh, yeah. Let's see. What can we talk about? Go ahead, Stan. I wanted to ask that.
Well, I wanted to ask you guys a question, and Dave, it's something that's been chewing at me for a couple of years, and I hadn't really read about it in any way that made a lot of sense to me. But the phrase I've been using, because a lot of people are wondering, well, what exactly do the players want? And it seems like what they want, they now understand that the owners squeeze them at the beginning of their careers by sort of, having that 6-year control rather than allowing that to move to 5. And then with analytics dictating how they sign players, nobody signs a contract when you're 31 or 32. Nobody's getting more than unless you're really a superstar, like a Mike Trout. But you saw when Adam Jones was coming out of his contract, he basically got one really nice contract. He didn't get a 3-year, $60 million deal. they were basically telling Adam, hey, we can sign him for 3 or 4 million. So Adam grabbed a 2-year deal in Japan. So they're squeezing players at the beginning and the end. Last night on MLBTradeRumors.com, they had an article by TC Zendeka, but it was sort of, he wrote the bullet points to the article by Travis Sawchuk. Do you know who Travis is out of Detroit? And it basically was dealing with, and I wanted to go back and read it, but there's an error in it now, so I can't. But it basically has broken down the fact that MLB players' careers have been significantly shortened over the last 12, 15 years. It's gone from like 4.6 or 4.7 to 3.8, 3.9.
Right.
So I was talking to somebody else today about it, and they said what's happened is now when arbitration, which was supposed to be this big assist to the players because it was supposed to bump you up significantly, most teams now, they'll let you go at arbitration. They won't get in the arbitration game with you. And then it spikes the whole process gets spiked with players being free agents and being signed to shorter contracts. And if you're not like a star, they just sort of whisk you away and bring in guys that they can pay cheaper money to. Have you guys both noticed that?
I didn't really notice it to the numbers and to the extent that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
That's actually surprising to me. But you do see that there are guys that like an Adam Jones, and I think that's a great comp right there when you talk about him, where the contract that he had, and then normally after that nice contract that he got, that there'd be another 2 or 3 year deal, not the same numbers annually,
Right.
maybe close, or at least significant, where he throws another 2 or 3 year deal on the back end of that wasn't there. And yeah, look, they're trying to bump up the numbers of the minimum salary. I mean, when you start thinking about a minimum salary for a major league player, the last few years was, somewhere between $500,000 and $550,000. Well, that's a nice chunk of change. Ross, what was the minimum salary when you came to the big leagues for the first time?
12.
12,000. Yeah.
12,000.
Yeah. So, and it was 62.
Rubble only got 13,000.
Right. So, and for me in 1987, the minimum salary was 62.5. So, significantly higher than 12, but still not $550,000. I mean, it doesn't. It's not really. The numbers really kind of don't mesh as far as inflation goes. So they're trying to raise that. I see that they're talking about numbers of 650, 670, 690,
Right.
like that as minimum salaries. So the key is that if everybody's making higher numbers in the beginning, then even though you may not necessarily progress and jump a lot, if you spent your first 3 years in the big leagues and you made 690 and then 720 and then 750 or 800,000 before you actually got to arbitration, if it was still at 3 years, not counting the Super 2 guys, you still made a nice chunk of change. So it's just, I understand it. The money's there, and I understand the players trying to get as much as they can because the shorter period of time now to make it, and I get that. But I think it's still hard for the fans to think, wait a minute, you guys are squabbling over millions of dollars. You're not squabbling over dollars. So I still think, and I agree with Ross that I think the general public is like, wait a minute, the owners, there's so much money out there. Maybe they kind of side a little bit more with the players, but it's still both sides. And the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of money out there, and they're just trying to figure out how to divvy it up. And at some point in time, they'll figure it out again.
Yeah, the players over the last few years their salaries are going down. Revenue is going up. Now you got gambling and a lot of other things that they're not even included. They don't even talk about the tickets, the parking, the concessions, which is a large chunk, ticket prices. So yeah, the money is there, how to divvy it up. But more, as Stan said, more young players are getting the big leagues now. They're getting there at an older age. And then by the time that free agent thing comes up, they're 30 years old, 29, 30 years old. They're not getting the big the big checks. They've figured out, the people that run baseball now have figured out how to use the analytics.
It's
to
the
do-
analytics are, yeah.
To do whatever they want with that particular player. They can make him look good. They can make him look bad. And usually it goes, well, obviously the careers are shorter. The money for the younger players. You got a young player that, that has a great second or third year. He's still making, under $1 million when the average is what, 4 or 5. I know that, and we're squabbling over millions of dollars, and being in the minor leagues for a guy, as tough as it is, they are as close to hitting the lotto as anyone by getting to the big leagues for whatever the minimum is, $500,000 or higher, and a chance to make millions. So that's a pretty good thing. But yeah, it's I just hope people get together and do the smart thing, which I really think I'm a negative person, but I really think they have to work this out somehow. You just hate to see them lose any games.
Dave, I want to talk about the other thing that you're quite passionately involved with. Your son, Steve, started a business about a little over a year ago, I believe, Optimal Baseball Performance. Tell us a little bit about the business, how it's growing, and we'll have Steve on in a few weeks to talk about it too. And then we'll hear about how his in-laws are living, his parents are living there and Bailey is accepting it. But all kidding aside, how's Optimal Baseball Performance going, and what sets it apart from other teaching scenarios that are out there for players?
Yeah, he's been going now probably a year and a half in the Bel Air location. He's up
right
in Bel Air, and it's really going well, and he's really busy, which is great. I'm actually helping him a bunch, which I don't want to do because I want to be retired like Ross. But it's one of those deals to where I am kind of helping him a couple hours a night through the busy time there. And I think, well, what sets him apart is simply that he does a baseball training, and it's a training center as opposed to going there for lessons. Do we teach them how to do mechanical things? Yes, but it's more of the main program is there's a half hour you come in, you do a functional workout. So the workout is not just to get loose, it's actually designed to make you functionally strong. In other words, the way you swing a bat or the way you throw a baseball or specifically pitch a baseball, there are certain movements that you do. There are, when you come in to start with Steve, he does an assessment. He does a physical assessment with you. It takes him about 15, 20 minutes where he goes through different things. And he finds out, are there certain limitations? Because, we always used to say, well, you take the ball like this and take your arm and you go like this. And it's like, well, what if they can't do that? What if they have? What if they have a physical limitation because they have something going on with their scapula, or they have something going on with their bicep, or something going on, in their core that may be weak, and it doesn't allow them to actually do what you're asking them to do. So that's first and foremost. Let's find out if they have any limitations. Whatever they have, we can specifically work on. The functional strength workout works on the variety of all the different movements that you may have in a throwing or a hitting, motion. So that is first. They come in, then we do some knee drills, and then different drills on, rocker drills, and basically try to step by step take them through a delivery and understand that we do 3D motion capture on them. We can do a 3D motion. We hook up sensors to them through the computer, and all of a sudden we can see how they're sequencing through their delivery. Are their hips popping too soon? Are they coming through with the right force? Is it weak? Is it strong? When they come through, are they sequencing properly? Does the chest come through, then the elbow, then the hand? You'd be really surprised that when you look at somebody with a naked eye and you think, man, he looks really good. Then you hook them up to 3D motion. You're like, wow, they're actually out of sequence. As opposed to, you may look at somebody and go, man, that looks really quirky. And then you hook them up to 3D motion and they're perfect. They actually, it doesn't look right to the naked eye, but the sensors don't lie. And it shows exactly how their hips fire, then their upper body, then their elbow and their wrist. So that's another thing we have. I don't know if anybody else has 3D motion in Maryland, but it's something we do with On Base University. which is in conjunction with TPI, Titleist Performance Institute, and Dr. Greg Rose, who owns Titleist Performance Institute out of San Diego. And they're On Base University, which is the baseball side, with Tom House and a friend of mine named Steve Johnson, not my son. I know it's kind of weird. But Steve Johnson in Fairfax, Virginia, and Donnie Slott, who's big time, big leaguer for 10 or 12 years. They all devised this program, and they're not guessing anymore. And it's just, look, golf has been ahead by 20 years. Golf does all the good golfers, and they had 3D motion. And we were, now we have 3D motion for baseball. And again, it's just something that we do and we have that I don't know whether anybody else has, even in the state of Maryland, with the 3D motion.
How about
DJ, what is the age group that goes in there? I mean, the young kids, older kids, or just a variety? And how would you go about dealing with an older kid and a kid maybe that's 7 or 8?
They're all different and unique in their own way, because we have some kids that are maybe 8 or 9 years old, excuse me, and they're like the best students, so to speak. They catch it and they figure it out, and they listen to you, and they are able to take what you're telling them and be able to actually interpret that and then do it. And we have, some 16-year-old, and they come in and you show them and they're like, they just don't get it. And then you show them and we videotape them, and we try to show them the video so they can actually see themselves and different things. So the age isn't really a big deal. It's not really the age. What it really is that, are they ready? And you have some kids that are 7, 8, 9, and they're ready. And you have other kids that are 14, 15, and they're not ready. So mentally, it's kind of what they're ready for, mentally ready to adapt and make adjustments and accept some of the weird stuff that we might be telling them. And I try to overemphasize the fact that, hey, when I did it, I didn't do it this way. When I taught Steve, I didn't teach him this way. We were old school. We did it the way we were taught, and it worked. And the fact of the matter is, some guys can overcome and adjust, and they overcompensate. They're just great compensators. They might do everything, in essence, kind of technically wrong, but they're able to compensate physically and make it work. But it's not necessarily as efficient. It may not put them in a position to be less susceptible to injury. And that's why what we're doing now is that with the kids, if we can get them, and typically the sooner the better, but yeah, sometimes it's 7 or 8 or 9 when we like to get them before they develop some, habits that are not necessarily conducive to being efficient. Sometimes they're not mentally ready at 7, 8, 9, 10. So, again, they got to be ready for it mentally, and the age sometimes isn't a factor.
How does it work out with you and Steve? You both come from, I'm sure you taught Steve an awful lot, but his training now to do optimal baseball performance is coming from a different point of view. How does it interact with you and allow you to still help him, but you're talking your language and he might be talking a slightly different language?
Well, I'm talking his language because he's certified. I didn't actually go to the certification, but I actually been with my buddy Steve Johnson, like I said, not my son Steve, but my buddy Steve in Fairfax, who is co-owner with On Base University with Greg Rose out in California. And I've been talking to him for the last 15, 20 years about this stuff. So I kind of got immersed in it before my son Steve did. So, and Steve kind of got immersed in it when Tom House came to town a couple of years back and met with my Steve, and did some things, and I was down there. So I've kind of been learning it, even though I didn't actually go through the seminar. And then I've watched the seminar, and then I've watched Steve on how he is, teaching it. So basically, he'll kind of watch me, and we kind of he'll give me the evil eye, every now and then. If I say something, he's like, no, we don't do it that way anymore. So
thanks.
Yeah, and it's his business. It's not mine. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, I got you. So, and I told him all along, I was like, look, don't be afraid to tell me if I start to say something that's a little different than, and go like, and you use the right words and phrasing. If I go off on a little tangent, about, old school, I try not to do that.
And you can't get too upset with him because you're living in his house now.
Well, we're off to the side. It's not, and we paid for our part, so I don't care what he said.
Okay. I wanted to clarify that. Hey, I know the address of the place is 728 Bel Air Road, Unit 113 out in Bel Air. The phone
Right.
number I have in front of me is 410-608-8023. What is a web address?
Yeah, it's optimalbaseball.com. And you can go to the website and get a hold of him there, email him. On the website, it'll have a way to contact him or call him at that number, 410-608-8023. And, and it runs in sessions. It's not the same where like you pay like a half hour for a session. The sessions actually are an hour and a half long. So you come in, again, you do a workout for a half an hour, then you start doing some knee drills and some rocker drills for a half hour. Then you go into another cage, and then you start doing some other things, which puts the whole delivery together. And at the end, you end up throwing 10, 15 pitches and kind of put it all together. So it's an hour and a half program, and it's designed to be with someone else. It's not one-on-one. We'll actually have maybe 6 people in there.
Okay.
Program. We'll have 2 in, then they're doing a warm up, and then 2 are actually working knee drills and rockers, and 2 more are in a different cage. And then when the 2 leave there, the other 2 switch to the other cage, the other 2 go in there, and 2 more walk in the door. And it's designed to do like a 2 or a 2.5 minute little kind of basically a drill. And then you wait while the other guy does the drill. And then they switch off back and forth, because you can't work for an hour and a half constantly, because then physically you're just not able to do that. You wouldn't be able to control your body by the time you're done. So it's designed to, be 100%, minute and a half, 2 minutes, take a break while the other one's doing it. Then you jump back and forth.
And it takes into account pitching, fielding, and hitting, right?
It's basically pitching and hitting.
Pitching
Some
and
of the
hitting.
younger kids come in, we can give them drills on what they need to do as far as fielding goes, but it's really designed for pitching and hitting. And clearly the fielding, you have to have certain throwing mechanics. So we can help them, get better throwing mechanics, but it really is designed more pitching and hitting.
All right.
How often do they do that?
You got one more, Ross? And
Yeah,
then we'll let-
really a couple. How often
Okay.
Do they do this? Once a week, twice a week, every other day?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah, it's a program. It covers over a 12 or 13 week quarter. So it's the one slot or one quarter of the year. It's a 3-month thing, and they come 10. They basically pay for that session, and they come once a week for 10 times. It gives them a chance to have a week off, or they're on vacation, or they miss a week because they're sick. They have 12 or 13 weeks to get their 10 weeks in.
Okay.
And if they get all 10 weeks in and they want to pay for an extra week or 2 because they didn't miss any, they can do that as well. But then also what happens is that, we make sure that we tell them that, look, here's your drills. Here's what we're doing. You got to go home, and not tomorrow, but the next day. You got to do it for a couple minutes, not for an hour and a half, but you got to do something, in that 2 days from now. And then 4 days from now, you got to do it again. And then when you walk back in the door a week from now, we'll know who's been working on it and who hasn't, because the guys get better quicker. Or we also know the ones that walk in there, like, he's been coming for 3 times and he doesn't look like he even knows what it was the first time he walked in, because, and it's really interesting. And Ross knows this when you do any kind of pitching, because he, with the pitching coach for such a long time, you can take the horse to the water trough, but you can't make them drink it. And you can teach them all you want, but if they're not willing to actually take the information and work on it and try and understand that failure is a part of it and all that, they're not going to get better. So what's the great thing about it, and Ross saw this when he sent guys to the big leagues for all those years, and you see a kid and you watch him grow as a player, and you take a sense of pride in being able to help them. They still have to do it. You can't do it for them. They still have to do it. But if you just give them the information and you see them take that information and then make themselves better with the information that you were able to give them, it's really neat. It's really a cool thing. And again, we haven't sent anybody to the big leagues yet. But I gotta believe when Ross was able to, call somebody into the office and see a kid who maybe he thought when they got to AAA that this kid will never get in the big leagues. And 3 years later, that kid worked so hard.
Yep.
Also, you send him to the big leagues. That's pretty cool.
What kind of feedback do the parents give you?
Well, it's really interesting because most of the parents don't stay. They drop them off. We have some parents that do stay and watch. And in the end, I just actually was talking to one of the parents tonight. I was like, look, we need to know your schedule in the spring, because Steve and I want to get a chance to go out and watch the kids actually perform in games. and see if they can take the stuff that, they're actually doing in the drills and all the different things when they put it together at the end of their session. Then when they get in the game, are they reverting back to their old self, or they are able to take some of these things and make it, part of their own? Because as much as it always looks like you're trying to make everybody do the same thing, they're not going to be doing the same thing. They have their unique DNA on how they actually throw or hit that makes them unique. And we don't want to change that, but there are certain things that we see that we know some things are efficient and some things are not. We can't tell them necessarily by the naked eye all the time. And then there's other things that allow them to create more power and some things that will be holding them back. So we know this now and we can watch them. So even though they might be 13 and 14 and they've been an all-star every year, and we always get that, it's like, I don't think you understand. My son's an all-star. I'm like, yeah, I do get it. I understand that. And the last all-star didn't make his high school team. So, you got to understand that every level, the competition gets tougher and tougher, and they've got to be reaching to get better and better and better all the time, or they're going to be left by the wayside.
Right.
Dave, I've got a quick one, and then we'll let you get out of here. Appreciate the time tonight. Ross and I definitely appreciate it. Optimalbaseball.com is the website. My question is, right now, you say business is pretty good. Are you finding that, I know Steve Johnson isn't Jim Palmer or Scott McGregor, Dennis Martinez. Is his name recognition what has helped get him off to a good start? How much is it name recognition? How much is it that people, the parents, are really studying what he's teaching and buying into that?
Yeah, I don't necessarily know a lot of it is name recognition. It's interesting. Steve only played, briefly for those 3 seasons with the Orioles. So he doesn't have the same name recognition I have because I've been doing the media and on the air for the past 15, 16 years. So that's why my name's kind of stayed, fresh in people's minds, not because most people don't know I played. I run into people all the time. They're like, they don't know who I am or I played, if I played, and that's because that was 31 years ago. But
don't say that.
It's crazy. I think most of his people have been word of mouth, which I think is a testament to where, if somebody's going there and then they tell somebody else and another teammate comes in the next session and that's how it's gone. Because we've had people come in and, they might be there for 2 or 3 sessions and they might be 13, 14 years old and they didn't even know we played. They're just going to some guy their parents take us to who is going to teach them something. So I don't necessarily know that I don't think that there's a lot of people that are coming because it's Steve Johnson and Dave Johnson, former major leaguers. For the most part, I think people have come and then
gotten results. They hear about results.
Maybe some results, or the people that feel that they're getting something out of it, and then they tell them, and then at some point, I guess they'll get it, that the idea that the 2 posters that are hanging up on the wall above the doors as they come in are Steve and I. So and they're like, you played? I'm like,
yeah, thanks.
Dave, we really appreciate it. Again, I urge any parent or a youngster that's out there wanting to get better at baseball, check out the website, optimalbaseball.com. We'll have Steve on in a few weeks. Really appreciate it, Ross. I mean, Ross. I always appreciate Ross, but I really appreciate it, Dave. All right. Is Ross living with you now too?
Well, only when I come up there.
I can hear the echo. I think he creeped in next door.
All right. Hey, thanks, guys. We'll talk to you soon. Thursday night, Gary Stein and I will have the chairman of the Maryland Stadium Authority on, and that's Thomas Kelso. We'll look forward to that. See you guys soon. Bye.